Wow, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, Russian connection.
Simmons from NBC News. You're the subject of intense scrutiny in America because of your meeting with Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
There any comments about that. We now have a session about blockchain.
I know you do, but the thing is, there is some confusion over what exactly happened. Were you talking about business or were you talking about politics?
Further comments, please.
No problem. Can I just ask, have you been contacted by the FBI or would you be prepared to talk to them? Mr. Gorkov? I'm sorry. Mr. Gorkov, it's just a question of understanding what happened in the meeting.
Good morning and welcome to AM Joy. Yes, indeed, it is a matter of understanding what happened in that mysterious meeting between Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner and Russian banker Sergei Gorkov. That was my colleague Keir Simmons asking Gorkov the question federal and congressional investigators leading the Russia probe are asking themselves right now. What happened in that 30-minute December meeting? As of now, it's unclear. Gorkov's bank, Vinesh Econom Bank, which is the subject of U.S. sanctions, claims the meeting was strictly a business matter, that Gorkov met with Kushner in his capacity as a businessman. But the White House claims it was a diplomatic encounter. So, did they discuss sanctions against Russia for its invasion of Ukraine? Or was the topic potential loans for Kushner buildings in deep debt? For now, we seem to have more questions than answers. And this week, Congress and the FBI added yet another question. Did the current Attorney General, then Senator Jeff Sessions, have an additional undisclosed meeting with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak while Trump delivered his first big foreign policy speech at D.C.'s Mayflower Hotel in April of 2016? While multiple current and former U.S. officials told NBC News that intelligence indicates a meeting or pull-aside did happen that day, the Justice Department has flatly denied any meeting at the Mayflower. But every week, we get a little closer to piecing the Russia puzzle together. And next week, we expect James Comey's testimony about his awkward conversations with Trump to take center stage, as long as Trump doesn't use his executive privilege to try and block the former FBI director from talking. Joining me now, MSNBC analyst Malcolm Nance, former FBI double agent Naveed Jamali, former State Department spokesperson Naira Hack, and Newsweek senior writer Kurt Eichenwald. Thank you all for being here. And Malcolm, I want to come to you first on Sergei Gorkov, because calling him a banker, I did my scare quotes because he really isn't quite a banker. Am I right?
He is not a banker in the traditional sense. He is a KGB-trained intelligence officer. He attended the Yuri Andropov School of Intelligence, the 101st School of Intelligence, human intelligence training for them, and then left what appeared to be Russian intelligence and went into banking. That indicates actually in our world that he may have started his career as a non-official cover intelligence officer who was put into banking in order to create what we now call the Bank of Spies, the VEB Bank, which was implicated in a arrest of FSB intelligence officers here in the United States a few years ago. So, you know, he can be a banker and a spy at the same time.
Right. And Naveed, you know, you then have this sort of further information. It's circumstantial, but the Washington Post has an article about Gorkov's whereabouts after this meeting with Kushner. It says a 19-seat twin-engine jet owned by a company linked to VEB, this bank, flew from Moscow to the United States on December 13th and departed from Newark Airport outside New York City at 5:01 p.m. on December 14th, according to positional flight information provided by a company called FlightAware, which tracks airplanes. The Post cannot confirm whether Gorkov was on the flight, but the plane's previous flights have closely mirrored Gorkov's publicly known travels in recent months, including his trip to St. Petersburg the week the story ran, and after leaving Newark on December 14th and headed to Japan, where Putin just happened to be. Would it be common if Gorkov felt that he had sort of mission accomplished in talking to Jared Kushner to then go and report back to Putin?
Yeah, I mean, look, the whole thing is questionable. And as Malcolm said, I mean, VEB Bank, this dates back to this massive arrest in 2015 where we had the nexus of Carter Page. So I think there is something to that, Joy. I also think that, look, even if this was, and I'm going to give a long, big leap here, even if this was an innocent meeting on Jared Kushner's part, the Russians had to look at this and say, the future son-in-law of the President of the United States wants to meet with us. How can Russian intelligence take advantage of this? And I absolutely guarantee you that the Russian intelligence, even if we take, again, a stretch here and say Gorkov was not a non-official cover intelligence officer, I have to believe that word would have gotten back to the intelligence community on the Russian side, and they would have looked at this and said, how can we take advantage of this? How can we manipulate it? Jared Kushner put himself, at best, in a position to be manipulated manipulated by Russian intelligence. And that is just, I mean, that is remarkable for someone a month away from entering the White House.
And Kurt Eichenwald, you know, if there is an innocent explanation for all of this, one wonders why the stories keep shifting, right? So you now have, the Chicago Tribune had a piece that talks about there's a discrepancy between what the Russians say was going on and what the White House says. The Kushner, the Russian side, the VEB side, is saying it was a business meeting, that they were meeting with Jared Kushner as the head of the Kushner companies. This is even after the election. But the White House is saying, no, he was on a diplomatic mission. How do we square that?
Well, we can't. And the problem is here, there is no innocent explanation. Every answer they have is bad. And, you know, you've got a situation, it's sort of like you're left with, is Jared Kushner a fool or is he corrupt? You know, you have, all right, let's assume it was a business meeting. You want to borrow money. Do you know of many bankers who come flying from another country to you to talk to you about giving you money? This is not making any sense, number one. Number two, Jared Kushner knew what his role was. Jared Kushner knew that his father-in-law was about to be the president of the United States. And he feels like it's appropriate to be going to banks that are connected to the Kremlin and saying, hey, I want some money. Okay, that's business operation idea. Number two, you have a meeting between Jared Kushner and a bank in terms of dealing with national security issues, supposedly, well, or getting into issues of diplomacy. Well, what is Jared Kushner doing getting involved in that to begin with? And secondly, why are they doing this at a time when Donald Trump is not the president of the United States? Nothing should have been going on without it being done in coordination with the State Department. That is how these things are handled. Yeah. You don't start with, you know, coming administration now starts running secret meetings undermining the national security and foreign policy of the United States. It just doesn't work that way.
And Naira, you work for the State Department. I'm sure you would concur that that is the normal way that things take place. We now get more and more information dripping out that this may have been conversations about lifting sanctions. And this period of time is actually very interesting timeline-wise, because mid-December, the Obama administration had not yet implemented the new sanctions on the Russians for the hacking of the DNC. That didn't happen until the announcement of it was December 30th. So you're in this period where the Obama administration is deciding what they're going to do in response to the intelligence services saying that Russia hacked in and interfered our election. And in that interregnum, you have the Trump incoming people trying to get these back channels to happen. And there may have been discussions about lifting the previous sanctions. They would have been talking about lifting the Crimea-related sanctions on the Russians. So what do you make of the fact that now you fast forward, the Washington Post has a story this past week about the Trump administration trying to essentially lift the new sanctions, to lift the sanctions that had to do with hacking our very election by returning the Maryland and Long Island compounds that were seized by the United States and taken away from the Russians. What do you make of that?
Context is key, and the context points to this being a quid pro quo situation. It really does look like Jared Kushner, as the son-in-law and connected directly to the president, was having these meetings so that he could make things easier for the Russians down the line in exchange for helping his father-in-law get elected to the presidency. That's part of the problem of this family not understanding how government works. They actually could have created a better or different relationship with the Russians had they used the State Department and the existing channels. There's no problem with wanting to have a different relationship with Russia when you are new commander-in-chief. The problem is trying to avoid all government sources, all government access and channels to have an objective that is fundamentally about reward, give and take, and deal-making related to family connections.
And Malcolm, these two complexes, the Obama administration believed were actually used for espionage. Is there any innocent reason that you would give back complexes that were used for spying back to the country that used them?
Well, you know, these facilities have been known for decades to have been dual role. They were actual recreation and resting facilities for the Russians and their diplomatic personnel, and known since perhaps John F. Kennedy's time that they were intelligence collection centers. Now, the key part of that is, we may want to keep them operating because we may have exploited their systems. I have no earthly idea. However, the Obama administration had determined that they were played a role in the hacking of the U.S. election through cyber warfare, and that and the 35 intelligence personnel that were operating those systems needed to leave the United States. So for anyone to come back, and this may have been Michael Flynn's phone call 5 times in one day, assuring them that they would be coming back, which is mind-boggling to actually bring back an intelligence collection center of a hostile nation. You know, at some point, I think Donald Trump is just going to up and admit all of this. That I'm going to bring it back.
Or Putin will do it for him because he has been so thrown under the bus. I mean, and you have the fact, Naveed, that 8 days before this announcement or this leak about giving back the compounds, the Russian sort of Twitter world, that they're, I guess, one of their state-run Twitter accounts tweeted a demand that they give the compounds back, and then a few days later we hear that they're going to give them back. There does seem to be a lot of coordination, at least publicly. It looks like there's a lot of coordination. In your view, given what we know now, the Democrats have written a letter. They wrote a letter to Don McGahn, the White House counsel, who has his own interesting history. We're going to have to get into that one day on this show. Saying that given the severity of the allegations and prior revelations that Mr. Kushner omitted the meeting with Kislyak and dozens of other foreign contacts from his security forms when he got a security clearance, they're requesting that he immediately lose his security clearance. In your view, should Jared Kushner lose his security clearance?
I mean, absolutely. Look, the reality is that if Jared Kushner or even Michael Flynn had been honest, and let's just say that at best that this was an oversight, an omission, which I don't think it was, but let's assume that they had actually dutifully and correctly written on their SF-86 in the equip system, they'd actually put these meetings. I think it's very possible that the person reviewing that application would have probably not given them a clearance, because look, meeting with a Russian, intelligence officer, meeting with, a month before you get into the White House as a private citizen, for the average person, that would be a red flag. That would be a disqualifying thing. So even if they had been honest and truthful and complete in their answer, that alone, that meeting probably would have stopped them from getting a clearance. And so right now, if they're disclosing it, I think that it is absolutely fair not only to remove that clearance, but probably to remove them from the position of trust and confidence until this can be resolved. That's the normal course of action for anyone else.
And Kurt, is it add to the sort of intrigue of it that the person in the meeting with Kushner is the very guy, Michael Flynn, who winds up getting turfed out of the administration because of his previously undisclosed and sort of weird contacts with Kislyak and with other members of potentially Russian intelligence?
Well, actually, I kind of find that to be the most interesting element, because when you start to think of how an investigation works and you start going up the chain of command, Flynn is the fellow who knows where all the bodies are buried. Flynn was there. Flynn is also the person who is under the greatest threat of criminal charges, given all of his failures to disclose relating to Turkey, relating to his meetings. And so I would be totally expecting there to be testimony of a witness, Michael Flynn, as to what Jared Kushner said at that meeting.
Yeah, that's going to be the key. Really quickly, Malcolm.
Okay, I've got a very interesting point about that Michael Flynn, Jared Kushner thing. If Michael Flynn escorted Jared Kushner into this meeting where they asked for covert communications, as ex-director of the Direct Defense Intelligence Agency, he would have known what U.S. capability was to break those diplomatic communications. Did he instruct Jared Kushner, go and ask for secure comms because we have no way of breaking it? That right there is an Espionage Act violation. We need to find out whether Flynn knew what was going on in that room or whether he encouraged it because he was compromising U.S. intelligence.
Yeah, and let's not forget, for those viewers out there, and it's tough to remember all the timeline, but Michael Flynn happens to be the guy who also visited the GRU. He bragged about being the only American former military person to go inside of Russian secure diplomatic or secure, basically, spy facilities. So he knew what they looked like from the inside. Malcolm Nance, Naveed Jamali, thank you very much. Nayera Haq.
Hello friends, we come to the end already. Have you subscribed yet? Press the subscribe button and the like button and also the share button. Thank you and have a nice day.